You said for Christians, these aren't good terms and that this is not a workable framework. Intersectionality, identity politics, these are not workable solutions, philosophical framework for Christians. But I would broaden it out and say it's not workable for people. This is why we're living in one of the most polarizing ages ever. Um, because because perhaps I might suggest that when we look at identity, we're not only shutting some people out because of that power hierarchy thing. You think of a Foucault and all these other people. We're not only shutting some people out and shutting some people up, we're also doing a disservice to the people who now have a voice because of their intersectionality, simply because now you are identified by your grievance. You're identified by what went wrong with you. Now, I can't think of a worse thing to do to a young person or a person in general than to identify you based upon what's wrong. And I think furthermore, as we've shifted toward this kind of post modernity, some people are calling it meta modernity. I don't know if you're familiar with that term at all, but we don't want to get into that. But as we've shifted further from this, we've started to identify ourselves merely by external characteristics, moving from the time that I believe in your age and my age, and maybe a little bit less in my age than yours, where we used to identify people, and I know it sounds like I'm saying, oh, the good old days, but where we used to identify people based upon their more internal characteristics. That may not be entirely fair, but I'm hearkening back to Martin Luther King Jr., whose dream was that we judge people based upon the conduct of their character rather than the color of their skin. And I got to throw this in here because I know you got some great responses to this, but then this goes into the coming out phenomenon. Okay, so now I'm truly wondering, and I hope this doesn't sound like a backhanded thing. I'm truly wondering now if kids are truly coming out because they truly are gay or lesbian or transgender, or if it's just Vogue. When you look at the statistics right now per Barna, they saw like 0.2% of baby boomers said that they had non-heterosexual lifestyles. It's like zero point 0.2 or something like that. It might be 2%, but very, very low. And then you move all the way down the line, and in the last two generations, from millennial to Gen Y, it doubled. That number doubled. So now 16% of the population, we used to call them minority, still minority, but it's increasing rapidly. 16% of the population identify themselves as non-heterosexual, non-binary, whatever, within the LGBTQ spectrum of like millions of genders or whatever. So, and I'm not saying that flippantly. What I'm just saying is that there's got to be something, if you're an honest person, that explains that phenomena. So I want to just to throw that in there, so and then maybe you can kind of speak to that. But I have a suspicion. I'll save my suspicion after I hear yours as to why that number is increasing so rapidly in the wake of post modernity, in the wake of cultural Marxism, identity politics type stuff.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of different factors. I do believe that there was a sense where people in my generation and later maybe didn't feel comfortable, or they were fearful of being open about what they were experiencing.
Yeah, so there's that. So now we live in a more open, a more open age now that people can come out of the closet freely.
Right, and there's actually some very interesting research done by not a Christian, not a conservative, but someone named Lisa Diamond, and she has a book called Sexual Fluidity. So we think that it's proven that sexuality is fixed. There's actually no research showing that sexuality is none, not a shred of evidence that any research that's done that says sexuality is fixed. The only person that I'm familiar with that has done some solid research is this lesbian feminist scholar, Lisa Diamond, and it's fascinating what she's shown. That though male sexuality may be a bit more fixed, but female sexuality is very fluid. But so anyway, and one of her points is we used to think that, if we had kind of like a curve, we have lots and lots of people who, maybe identifying as heterosexual or their experience is heterosexual, which by the way, not only do I think cisgender and straight, I don't think the term heterosexual and homosexual should be properly used. And I agree with you. I was being charitable. That's why I just said Christians, but by anyone, these shouldn't be terms that should be used. And the reason is because we've made these terms to describe people or define people, when accurately they only describe our feelings, meaning our experience, our attractions, our desires, or our relationships. But anyway, so we used to think that people who have these, heterosexual relationships is really, really high. And then over here, we kind of have, low percentage of people who have same-sex attractions or relationships. And then kind of in the middle is kind of, bisexuality, which is kind of much lower than the other. And she was actually saying that actually that's not what she's showing from her research, not true, that actually same-sex attractions is still kind of low, but there's more people in this kind of in between, which is of course kind of more of a Kinsey framework, which is anything doing with Kinsey is fraught with I don't even know what to call it, but other than evil, bad research. But so we have people kind of here in the middle. But so I think people then that are just naturally in the middle, that before, maybe they had a little bit of same-sex attractions, very, very little. And, but they just never told anyone. They would talk about, and they just kind of would just, express themselves in heterosexual relationships, et cetera. But then those people now who have that might be like, oh, well, I have this opportunity as a person who's, in this oppressor group to, and who wants to be heterosexual anymore. I can actually say, because I do have some of these same-sex attractions, that I could, identify in that way. Or just say you're queer, which doesn't mean that I need to change any of the way that I live. I just am queer. I am binary, or I'm transgender, or, whatever. I just need to wear different clothes. So there's that opportunity. But yes, whereas before it was kind of cool, now it's actually feeding into that I now can have authority. See, there's a difference. Whereas 5-10 years ago, it was this trend, it was hip to be gay or LGBTQ, but now it's shifted. Now that we're kind of in the whole Black Lives Matter era, Me Too era. See, Me Too kind of kicked it off. I believe her. Why? Because she's oppressed. See, I mean, it's all kind of tying back to oppression and power struggle.
Catch new episodes of Indie Thinker with Reed Uberman for free right now by going to YouTube or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Simply type Indie Thinker with Reed Uberman in the search bar and click on my face. Don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe to stay informed when a new episode drops.